going to be reviewing Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse. The game stars Trevor Belmont, who's known in the Japanese version as Ralph. Ignore the opening text. We all know Dracula is destroying humankind to avenge his wife being burned at the stake. Trevor is an ancestor of Simon, making Castlevania 3 a prequel. There are at least 10 stages this time around, some of which have multiple pathways to choose from. Do you want to climb the clock tower? Or go straight into the woods? Do you want to go underground? Or take the upper path that leads to the ghost ship? Just like in Castlevania 1, after you defeat a boss at the end of a stage, a red orb comes down and you touch it. The same weapons and power-ups are at your disposal, and Trevor controls exactly like Simon. You get many familiar enemies, plus a whole new selection. There are these jellyfish-like creatures that usually split when you strike them, owls, skeletons with whips and swords, giant toads, and the Japanese version has these creatures that behave exactly like the hunchbacks. On top of Medusa heads, how do you feel about these demons that move up and down as you're climbing the stairs? Medusa herself makes a return, along with the giant bat, the mummies, Death himself, and good old Frankie. But they're all much easier to fight this time around. For the most part, the bosses are pretty easy, except maybe these dragons. Mainly because getting hit will knock you off and kill you. Once again, you refill your health by breaking walls and finding pork chops inside. I so bad want to whip the walls of my apartment and find a pork chop in them. All I'd probably find is my next door neighbor, though. And an eviction notice. But if I did find a pork chop in the end, maybe it'd be worth getting evicted. In this game, you run into other characters and get to play as them. First we have Great Dynasty. Doesn't appear in the animated series. I don't think he's ever mentioned in it either, but he's awesome. He's a little more agile, he can scale walls and ceilings, often allowing him to plow through stages, and best of all, he can control his direction in midair. So, if he can control midair jumps, why not Trevor? The only real problem I have with Grant is his attack. All he gets is a dinky dagger. He can throw axes and use the throwing dagger, at the cost of hearts, of course. In the Japanese version, he gets to use the throwing dagger free of charge, which increases his attack range tremendously. Oh, and he's also physically weaker than Trevor. As is Saifa Belnades. Her attack range is also quite short. A staff. But she's my absolute favorite partner to bring along when I play this game. I love her magic spells so much. A fireball, an ice attack that freezes enemies solid for a few seconds, and powerful electrical orbs that rip through a lot of creatures standing in your way, especially bosses. Alucard, on the other hand, well, he's not very fun to play as. His weapon is a super weak fireball. It can be upgraded to shoot 3 at once, but the attack range doesn't improve all that much. The best thing he can do is turn into a bat at the cost of hearts. Other than that, it's kind of a shame and a disappointment for anyone expecting him to be as awesome as he is in the animated series. Or in Symphony of the Night. You can only bring one partner with you at a time. For instance, if you encounter Saifa while you have Grant with you, she takes his place. You use the select button to switch between characters, so I feel like maybe they could have made it possible to bring at least 2. After all, Trevor fights Dracula with both Saifa and Alucard in the Netflix series. Regardless, the partner system makes for a good percentage of Castlevania 3's replay value. Without a doubt, it's my favorite of the NES trilogy. But it's harder than the first game. Stiff controls? Check. Frustrating level design? Check. Look at these seesaw things. It takes me forever to reach these platforms more often than not. And these falling blocks slow this level down to no end. It's so boring. Whereas enemy placement made pits hard to avoid in the first game, it makes the stairs hard to get through here. These bone towers that spit fireballs are placed at the far end of the screen. There's no way to climb the stairs without getting hit by them unless you have the cross or electrical orbs. It really doesn't help how defenseless you are on the stairs. I don't understand why enemies deal more damage in later stages, let alone why Grant and Saifa are weaker. The levels are pretty long and they skimped on the checkpoints. Sometimes there won't be a pork chop when you need one. Once again, you have unlimited continues and now you have a password system. That way you can shut off the game and keep going some other time if need be. The Help Me code gives you 10 lives instead of 3. I used it for this review because I need it, and so do you. Castlevania 3 requires a lot of patience, particularly the latter half of the game. When you get to the Grand Stairway, it's time to stock up on hearts and face Dracula. He teleports and you can only attack his head. This time he launches fire pillars. Anyone who plays this game after watching AVGN's review, the pillars are not unavoidable. On the contrary, his second form is some kind of cluster of heads that drip blood. Whatever it's supposed to be, it's very easy. Dracula has a third form. Pazuzu, I guess. He's big, you can only attack his head, he shoots lasers right where you are, and the middle floor breaks into a series of platforms. But he's not that much harder, especially if you have the axe. He doesn't even move. All he does when you beat him is fade to black, and congratulations, you've beaten Castlevania 3. Each ending's a little different depending on who your partner was, but they all begin with you standing on a cliffside and seeing the castle crumble. My favorite version of this game is the Japanese version. I don't own a cartridge of either game, but I got the Castlevania Anniversary Collection on my Switch precisely for this review. This version has a lot of differences that make for the ideal experience. But first I want to point out that the Help Me code doesn't work here. It was added for the Western release. But in general, the Japanese version is easier. There's no shame in that. You're here to have fun, not stress yourself out. For one thing, enemy damage depends on the enemy itself rather than on the levels. A number of enemies also take fewer hits to kill, plus there are more crosses to pick up. By far the highlight of the Japanese version is the music. In Castlevania 3 it's awesome as ever, and it's just so rich here. It supports the Famicom's expansion audio, giving it some extra sound channels that enhance the music tenfold. Basically, my personal favorite way of playing this game is the Famicom version, with Grant and Sypha. A great game, but a hard one. In some areas, the Famicom version might be your best choice if you're a beginner of the NES trilogy. The US release is more suitable for masters of the first game. With that being said, I'm tempted to follow this up with a review of Super Castlevania 4. I could always save it for next year, unless of course this Halloween madness goes overtime. Let's be real here. With a movie like Nightmare Before Christmas, Halloween itself goes overtime. Sometimes it's all day, every day, all year round, depending on what you like to play, watch, or read, even if it's not explicitly Halloween themed. For me, that's Castlevania.